On WNIN Lawmakers this week, our guest is Indiana State Senator Vaneta Becker. We'll also get an update from the Indiana General Assembly. That's coming up next on WNIN. Welcome to WNIN Lawmakers. I'm John Gibson, news manager and local host of WNIN FM's Morning Edition. Before we check in with Senator Becker, here's Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith. He has this report on the week at the State House.
The final tax cut package will eliminate two utility taxes and cut the individual income tax rate down to 2.9%. That income tax cut will happen over at least 7 years. The utility tax elimination, which takes effect July 1st, will save the average Hoosier a few dollars on their monthly bill. And the first reduction in the income tax, taking effect in January, will save someone making $50,000 a year about $40. Hoosiers will be able to carry a handgun in public without getting a permit. Under legislation, the Senate debated for nearly 3 hours this week before passing it. Almost every law enforcement organization in the state opposes that bill, and it's not certain the governor will sign it. And the Senate defeated a measure that would have removed a legal defense for Indiana schools and public libraries accused of sharing harmful material with minors. The language was added to a bill that contained multiple unrelated provisions and likely failed for that reason. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
We're joined now by Indiana State Senator Vaneta Becker, who represents parts of Vanderburgh and Warwick counties. Senator Becker, good to have you back with us.
Nice to be here.
We appreciate it. Thank you very much. Well, let's talk about some of the things that Brandon just spoke about there in that summary. House Bill 1002 passed overwhelmingly. That's the tax break legislation. It does give a tax break for individuals, also some utility tax reductions. Can you explain what was in the bill and why you supported it?
That was very interesting. That bill passed the Senate 50-0. That doesn't happen very often where you get the minority to join. But I think the fact that actually with the surplus that we have, we wanted to give tax breaks, but we wanted to be very cautious because, as you know, with this Ukraine war, you never know what your revenues are going to be next year. And so we wanted to, our focus was to pay down more debt. And we still owe the Teachers Retirement Fund $9 billion. And so this will allow us to pay down $2.5 billion toward the teachers' retirement, the 1976 fund. And that's really important because as long as you owe that, you're not free of debt. And this would allow teachers then to more easily get a 13th check in the future. So, but it does cut the individual income tax eventually down to 2.9, and I do think it was very positive to cut the utility tax because right now people's tax bills their energy bills are going sky high, and unfortunately CenterPoint has the highest energy bills in the state. And so this will help everybody. If you just did there was some talk about trying to do a gas tax, but not everybody drives or has a vehicle. So if you're picking between one or the other, I think the energy tax bill cut is the most important.
Let's talk a little bit about that because, yes, especially here in the Evansville area, folks have been dealing with some skyrocketing energy bills. So how does this work? How will it perhaps encourage a company like CenterPoint to reduce bills?
It won't as far as their cost on the gas because they actually just pass along natural gas rates. But it will take off the utility tax that the state collected.
I see.
And that will cut people's energy bills on both the gas and the electric.
I got you. Let's also, you mentioned the Teachers Retirement Fund. I believe, isn't there a connection between that and the individual tax cuts? I mean, did we have to reach a certain point on the
You have to reach a
retirement
certain
fund?
point of revenue before we will actually continue to reduce the individual income tax. It'll go down next year, just starting in January of '23, but then it's going to depend on what the state's revenues are. There's points where if it doesn't grow above 2%, then there won't be a tax cut that year. It'll just have to wait until the next year or until the revenues are higher. We've been fortunate because of the federal COVID as well as all the money that the feds have given us.
Yeah, the relief, the COVID relief, and
The
that kind of
COVID
thing.
relief, and so we have more money than has been anticipated, and that's really the reason why.
All right. Well, we will wait and see if those tax cuts, especially for the individual tax cuts, if they do come to fruition. Let's move on to another bill that received a lot of attention, and that was the handgun bill that passed. It seemed to be doomed there for a while. It was resurrected in the final week of the session and passed. It did face a lot of opposition from folks like the Indiana State Police and many other law enforcement agencies. And as I understand, you voted no.
I did.
Why did you vote against it?
I voted against it because of my concern for law enforcement. Sheriff Wedding was opposed to it. Chief Billy Bolin, chief of the police, he contacted me. The Newburgh Police, the Warwick County Sheriff, all of law enforcement, as well as the Indiana State Police, were opposed to it. And, you know, it's not difficult. Indiana has made permits free. So it's really not difficult to get a permit. So, and you'll still have to, if you have, you can carry in other states, but if they aren't, if they don't have the same law, then you have to get a permit to travel to other states anyway. So a lot of people will probably still be getting a permit. But it's very dangerous for law enforcement when they pull somebody over. They're not going to be able to tell whether, and I think 18 is too young for people to be going around with handguns without a permit. There's going to be people.
That would have that allows that.
Yes.
At 18,
At
no longer need a
18
permit.
to get a gun without a permit. And I just think that's too young, and it's also too difficult on law enforcement to know who they're dealing with when they walk up to a car. And they're not going to be able to tell if those people are supposed to have a permit or not, because there are certain people with domestic violence situations, mentally ill, certain people, but they're not going to be able to tell whether those people are supposed to have a gun or not.
So in that kind of situation, they pull over a vehicle, they find out whose vehicle it is, and as it is now, they're able to get that information
Yes.
right away as to whether this person
Yes.
has a carry
Exactly.
permit or not.
Yes,
And in the future,
it's going to be much more difficult.
yeah. Do you think, and I haven't asked him myself, perhaps you haven't either, but do you think the governor will sign that bill?
I don't know if he'll sign it, but I think he will allow it to become law without a signature if he doesn't sign it. I don't think he'll veto it.
Yeah.
I just don't think he will.
Yeah, and that is an option, correct?
It's an option for him.
Yeah, in Indiana, a governor can just sort of.
They can veto it, and then it would take the next legislature to override his veto. But that would happen easily, because in Indiana, all you need is 51 votes to override the governor's veto.
I see, and of course, the Republican Party has supermajorities in both
Yes.
chambers. Yeah. All right, well, speaking of the governor, Governor Holcomb, he ended the state's COVID-19 public health emergency. It had been in place for practically 2 years. March of 2020 is when it was put in place. There were some legislative attempts to rein in his power in those kind of situations. What happened with that, and what were your thoughts on that effort?
Well, actually, I thought the governor has done a great job with the pandemic, and I think the majority of Hoosiers think so as well. I've asked people throughout this whole pandemic how they felt about it, and I thought his, maybe not everything, but I think for the most part he did a good job. And plus, if we hadn't did the language the way we did this year in the that allows him to rein in the emergency, we would have lost billions of dollars in Medicaid funding from the federal government, food stamps for people that had lost their jobs. A lot of that money would have not come to us. In fact, even the READY grant money for economic development, that was $500 million. We would not have had that money to do that had it not been for the federal funds.
Right.
So there were a lot of issues, and so I think he did it in a responsible way, and this way he has, overturned the emergency, and yet we will still continue, and people that were getting food stamps will still get that extra, I think it was $90 a month, and through the end of April.
I see. So that'll keep, so he found a way essentially to walk that line, keep
Yes.
the federal funding coming,
Yes.
but at the same time,
Go ahead and eliminate the emergency order.
yeah. All right, well, let's move on to another bill here that certainly got a lot of attention. That was House Bill 1134. It passed the Indiana House, but never came up for a vote over on the Senate side. It would have required teachers to post their curriculum online for parental review. It had received quite a backlash from teachers and other folks in the educational field. What were your thoughts on that, and do you think it's something that's going to come back around?
It may be back, but it's a bad bill. If that would pass, we would lose teachers left and right, and we already have a teacher shortage in the state of Indiana. And this would just have made it worse. You would have seen, if someone has a problem with what's being taught, all they need to do is to go to the principal, to the teacher first, the principal, the superintendent, and the school board to get it taken care of. And that bill just went way too far. It was going to make felons out of teachers. And I had a call from a retired teacher whose niece was she's enrolled in the School of Education at USI, and this retired teacher, she called me. She said, Vaneta, it doesn't affect me, but my niece is enrolled in that School of Education. She wants to become a teacher, but she said if this bill passes, she's going to change her major. Do you think it's going to pass? And I said, well, the House has passed it. The Senate's not going to, but there would be changes made. And even the governor's office, our new appointed, we used to have elected superintendent of public instruction.
Right.
Now it's appointed by the governor. And her point to us in the Senate was that she didn't really want that bill to go back to the House as it was because she was concerned with what they would put in it, to put back in that bill that she didn't think was good for public education. Or for charter schools. Charter schools, it was applicable to them too. So it just really went way too far.
Yeah. And so the Senate essentially did
nothing
kill
it. And you have to watch. You never know when something's going to come back at the last minute in conference committee. But it didn't. I think the House decided if they couldn't get what they wanted, the full bill, that they didn't want anything.
Right.
And that was okay with us.
And speaking of school, there was a House Bill 1041 that would ban trans females from participating in school sports, at least, for the gender identity, the team that fits their gender identity. It did make it to the governor's desk. Do you think, did you support this bill?
I did.
And why do you think it's important?
Well, I think what will happen, and I really talked to a lot of different people, because I don't think we want a male that has turned into a female compete against girls. Girls should play girls' sports because there is difference biologically. And I would have preferred that we just leave it up to the IHSAA, but didn't have that choice. And they actually, I talked to them, trying to think of his name, he's from Evansville, Paul Neidig.
Yeah.
He's part of the IHSAA, and he said, we have a process to deal with that. But there seemed like, and most of this stuff, it came from the House, was driven by the fact that the House has 23 primaries. And most of them are Republican primaries from people even further to the right than what we have. And so I think most of this, a lot of their bills were for political posturing.
Right, right. That's what I was going to ask you. Did it seem to be
Yes.
more for that than to actually
Yes.
change rules?
So, I talked to Paul Neidig. He says, Vaneta, we already have a process, and I've told your leadership that. They've only had one incident where they had to tell someone that they couldn't compete because they were still biologically a male in girls' sports. But I talked to people that were pretty progressive who just felt like we needed to protect girls' sports. Whatever your birth certificate says is what you should compete in. So, yes. And it passed the Senate, passed the House, and it's on to the governor's office.
All right. Well, let's also talk about while we're talking about education here a little bit. There was a House bill that began as a sentencing modification bill, but near the end of the session, the House added some unrelated issues to the bill, including parts of the Senate Bill 17, which prohibited materials harmful to minors in schools and libraries. Senator Becker, you voted against that final bill. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, I had some concerns really with the sentence modification part of that bill, and just the fact that I was very concerned. Originally, I thought the bill only applied in elementary schools, and I was okay with that. I originally supported Senate Bill 17 when it passed the first time. But when I found out that it applied to all libraries, not just school libraries,
Right.
I thought it went too far. And evidently a lot of other folks did too, because the bill was overwhelmingly defeated.
Yeah, yeah. Again, was that one of those bills that you think was more of a political posturing kind of a thing?
No, probably not, because that was Senator Tom's bill, and I know he had it last year as well. And I understand, I don't want to see minors exposed to pornography, but I also think there is a responsibility that parents have to know what their children are reading and what bills that they check out. And actually, schools already have a process for dealing with those kinds of issues.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to some of the bills that you authored this past session, the session that just ended. Let's talk about Senate Bill 84. That was on overdose deaths and suicide reportings. It was signed by the governor. I'm sure you're happy with that. Can you tell us a little bit about that bill and what it will do?
Yeah, basically we wanted to get a better record, especially for pregnant women, as to the cause of death, and we wanted better suicide reporting information. That's what this bill will provide. And this was Senator Lysing's bill, and I was happy to join on this bill because I thought it was a good piece of legislation. Because we have one of the highest infant mortality rates in the country, and our maternal health is not very good either, our mother's health. And so we need that information, and this will just provide better statistics on suicide and ways that we can prevent suicide.
And I know you're often interested or an advocate for home health care and
Yes.
other health. Yeah, also signed into law this week was Senate Bill 353 on home health aid training requirements. Can you tell us a
Yes.
little bit about that and what that will do?
That will require home health aides, people that work in nursing homes that deal with Alzheimer's patients, to have at least 6 hours of training. It's not additional hours, but it's within the 75 that they already have. And I just think we all know that Alzheimer's patients, that actually cost our economy about $1 billion a year. And I think those people need better training to deal with Alzheimer's patients. But another bill that was a House bill that I supported and authored in the Senate was House Bill 1140, which is really major when it comes to maternal health, and that will allow women low-income women who get Medicaid and who are on Medicaid. Currently in Indiana, they're only on Medicaid for 60 days. That's really not nearly long enough after they've had a baby.
Right.
And so this will expand that time. They'll be eligible for 12 months.
I see.
So the first year, and that's critical for healthier babies and healthier moms.
And has the governor signed off on that one?
I don't know where it's at in the process, but he will. It was something that the FSSA and the Board of Health as well, were strongly supporting.
Yeah.
So.
All right, and in the healthcare area, something called a psychology interjurisdictional compact.
Bill.
Yes, it's a bit of a mouthful. It was signed by
Yes.
the governor, as I understand it. Basically, what does that bill include?
And basically what that bill, and we've passed it in the Senate now for the last 2 years. We never could get a hearing in the House. It just allows psychologists from other states to come and practice in Indiana if they're part of the compact. We have a real shortage of psychologists in the state, and this will just allow other people on adjoining states, make it much easier for them to practice and help us with our shortage of psychologists in the state.
I see. We've talked a little bit about the governor. Of course, the governor is not with us today, but do you anticipate, much in the way of vetoes or anything that might not get signed? That passed?
I don't know. The governor did veto a bill last year, and we actually supported his veto, and it was on a bill that would have required an additional sticker on a gas pump. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know about you, but my eyesight's not good enough to read those small stickers anyway. So it was originally opposed by Farm Bureau, but then I think because of ethanol, they were concerned about ethanol. But the Senate did override, or the Senate sustained the governor's veto, which I was really surprised that they did. Mm-hmm. But they did. So and there's just he had a minor issue, and with the sticker part on pump, adding another sticker to a pump,
right,
just didn't think that was good public policy.
And as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that federal law already requires that sticker, correct?
Yes, and so that was one reason why he vetoed it. We already have a federal law on the books.
So it'd be repetitious.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the process. You mentioned a lot of bills that passed in the House. They seem to be mostly maybe along political lines. You mentioned before we went on today about the process up there, how some of the bills get carried over to the Senate and that kind of thing. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, during the short session, we have rules whereby the House can only file 5 bills apiece. The Senate
Each member.
Right. So, but the Senate can file 10 bills apiece. And so a lot of times a House member will come over and get a senator to file something that they want to see filed, but they don't have room. And so actually, we passed more bills this year than the House did. The House passed 105. I can't recall the number that we passed, but it was more than that. But only, out of the total, only 221 bills actually became law. And sometimes less is better.
Yeah. Were there any bills, that you hope to see more progress on that didn't happen this session, looking back?
I supported a bill that would have required hospitals to tell women after they've had a baby that birth control is available to them. It wouldn't have required them to take it, but what happens, especially, that's one reason why our maternal health and our infant mortality rates are so high, is because, in particular, low-income women who don't have easy access to birth control end up pregnant again. And that's hard on their bodies, and it's hard on their siblings. And this would have just required that a hospital tell them about the availability of contraceptives available to them.
Of course, next year we've got the long session. Do you intend to bring that back around?
Yes, I do. And this was a bill that was actually originally introduced in the House as well by a physician. She's an OBGYN, Dr. Fleming. And her bill didn't get a hearing either. So we'll continue to work on those bills, but in the past, unfortunately, Right to Life has not even supported birth control. So I think we need to continue to educate the public on the need, because that until we get some of that done, we're going to continue to see our infant mortality rates be high.
Yeah. And just quickly, the short session ended a few days before it had to.
Yes.
I understand the legislators were pretty much chased out of town due to basketball, right?
Yeah, they have a basketball tournament that started on the 10th, and so a lot of the hotels were not going to have room for at the end for legislators.
There you go. Well, hopefully next year you'll have plenty of hotel space, I would hope. Thanks again for being with us, Senator Vaneta Becker. We appreciate you stopping by as always. And also thanks to all of our guests this season. And that is a wrap for this legislative session. I'm John Gibson. You can find me at WNIN FM. And thank you again for watching WNIN Lawmakers.